of oppression and suppression and even destruction of its Muslim Uyghur population. And it's that atrocity that's taking place in real time right now that brings us together for this session. The figures are very hard to come by. China is a very secretive society and welcome to this webinar where we are hosting a number of people who will address us on the issues that are being faced right now by the Uyghur people in China. Official figures released by the Chinese authorities tell us that the population of Uyghurs in the East Turkestan region is just over 12 million, and that's about half the population of the area. And there may in fact be more. It's not certain that that's an accurate number. But in recent years, it has been very well documented that China has undertaken a policy of oppression and suppression and even destruction of its Muslim Uyghur population. And it's that atrocity that's taking place in real time right now that brings us together for this session. The figures are very hard to come by. China is a very secretive society and is promoting its own narrative on this situation. But from what we can assess, about 3 million Uyghur people have been incarcerated in concentration camps right now, solely because of their ethnic and religious identity. And millions more are being used as slave labor in Chinese factories. The Chinese government has become more authoritarian in recent years and is taking measures to slash birth rate as they are allowing Han Chinese to have more children. There are also credible and horrific stories about organ harvesting. And these and other abuses have prompted Canada recently to join the United States in declaring that the situation of the Uyghur population in China is genocide. And this declaration is very significant, and it hits home to me as a Jew because what we're witnessing is the largest scale of ethnic and religious minorities since the Second World War and the Holocaust. Out of that history, the call never again was raised. And it's in response to that call that we, a group of Canadian Jews, Muslims, and Christians, have come together to form the Canadian Multifaith Initiative for Uyghur Rights, which is the host of this event. You more about our initiative when Norman Franks addresses you a little later. But now I'd like us to hear from 3 members of the Uyghur community who have come here to be with us to give us first-hand reports on what has been going on in order to raise awareness in the community and hopefully to spur action in the community. And so I'm very grateful for our panelists who are here with us, and that's Mehmet Tohti, Akeda Pulati, and Turnisa, and they will share their stories with us. And I'm grateful also to Mufti Muhammad Sujat and Rabbi Susan Tendler and the very Reverend Christopher Pappas for joining us as moderators this evening in a show of support and a contribution to making the call of never again a reality. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first of our moderators, who is the very Reverend Dr. Christopher A. Pappas, or Dean Chris, as he is known. He's the Dean of the Anglican Diocese of New Westminster and the Rector of Christ Church Cathedral in Vancouver. He served in parishes in Alberta, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. He holds a PhD in biomedical science, neuroscience, from the University of Connecticut, and a Master of Divinity from Yale Divinity School, among other degrees related to ministry. He has served on national church committees, including as co-chair of the National Worship Conference. Dean Chris is a strong proponent of interfaith activities and has been active in a number of initiatives of that kind. And so I will turn it over to Dean Pappas to introduce the first of our participants.
Thank you, Alan. And it's my pleasure to be here this evening to hear the stories of these people. And it's my pleasure to introduce tonight, first, Akeda Pulati. Akeda is a Uyghur who was born in Urumqi, and she graduated from the University of Washington and began her working life as a business analyst. But she felt called to become a full-time activist, advocating for the Uyghur and other ethnic minorities that have been suffering in her homeland of East Turkestan. So starting from about 2019, she decided to speak up, first for her mother, Uyghur folklorist and ethnographer Rahil Dawat, who was a professor at Xinjiang University in Urumqi in East Turkestan, and who had been arbitrarily detained by the Chinese government since December 12th of 2017. You can hear all about Akeda's activities on behalf of her mom on the website called freemymom.org. So Akeda has been very much a strong grassroots activist, fighting for the release of her mother and joining many other human rights events. Beginning in January of 2021, to better raise awareness of what's happening to her mom and to her people,
Connecticut. He holds a PhD in biomedical science, neuroscience, from the University of Connecticut, and a Master of Divinity from Yale Divinity School, among other degrees related to ministry. He has served on national church committees, including as co-chair of the National Worship Conference. Dean Chris is a strong proponent of interfaith activities and has been active in a number of initiatives of that kind. And so I will turn it over to Dean Pappas to introduce the first of our participants.
Thank you, Alan. And it's my pleasure to be here this evening to hear the stories of these people. And it's my pleasure to introduce tonight, first, Akeda Pulati. Akeda is a Uyghur who was born in Urumqi, and she graduated from the University of Washington and began her working life as a business analyst. But she felt called to become a full-time activist, advocating for the Uyghur and other ethnic minorities that have been suffering in her homeland of East Turkestan. So starting from about 2019, she decided to speak up, first for her mother, Uyghur folklorist and ethnographer Rahil Dawat, who was a professor at Xinjiang University in Urumqi in East Turkestan, and who had been arbitrarily detained by the Chinese government since December 12th of 2017. You can hear all about Akeda's activities on behalf of her mom on the website called freemymom.org. So Akeda has been very much a strong grassroots activist, fighting for the release of her mother and joining many other human rights events. Beginning in January of 2021, to better raise awareness of what's happening to her mom and to her people, she became a full-time outreach director at the Campaign for Uyghurs based in Washington, D.C. So it's my pleasure and my honor to be able to introduce to you Akeda, and as she shares some of her story.
Thank you so much, Chris, for introducing me, and thank you so much, all of you here to hear Uyghur stories. So Uyghurs are experiencing the genocide. We need to know what's happening to Uyghurs, and we need to take actions. Today, I just wanted to share you, like, from a daughter's perspectives of how genocide is ruining families. I would love to make what's happening to Uyghur people more clear. So I would love to start by from a presentation. So I would love to share my screen right now for my presentation. First of all, short introductions to, if you can you hear my screen? So if you can see my screen. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself. I am a human rights activist, and I am the daughter of the missing scholars. I'm also an outreach director at Campaign for Uyghur. So for what's happening to Uyghur, I wanted to start by telling you a story. a story about a happy Uyghur family that is ruled by the Chinese government. This is my story, a true story. So these girls in these pictures, you can see she is so happy. She smiles like there is no sadness in this world. This was my happy life, like back in 20 years ago. At that time, the genocide is genocide is not happening yet, and we are not expecting the world will become something like that. I was at that time when I see my life was so peaceful, and when I see when I watching TVs and see the people are suffering, people are experiencing the genocides, or people are persecuting, and at that time there are many Holocaust movie going on. I was like, this would only happen in the past. Now I am living in a better century. But no, 20 years later, me experiencing the genocide. Uyghur people, experiencing the genocide. This woman here, she's a hardworking mother, and she's my real model. She she worked hard during the day, and after her work, she took care of her family. I thought this kind of people, this kind of persons deserves a better retirement life. In our education, we are educated in this way. You spend all of your life hardworking and obeying the law, you will deserve a better life. But now, because we are Uyghur, because we are Uyghurs, Chinese government won't give the person like my mother's a peaceful retirement life. This is a short introduction to what's happening to my mother. Her name is Rahila Dawood, and she was detained by the Chinese government in December 12, 2017. Before that, I talked to her every day, but just suddenly in 2017, December 12, I lost contact with her. My family member, like my dad and my grandmothers, cannot tell me what's happening to my mother. Where is my mother? It's kind of like a state secret. It's very ironic that just several months before less than a year before my mother was being detained, she was featured in a women magazines as a real model for Uyghur women to learn from. But less than a year, Chinese government detained her. Chinese government has been claiming that those kind of centers, those kind of place is educational centers for people to receive educations and job training. Why? So it doesn't explain why the real model, how could the real model like my mom needs education? How could like my mom's in her retirement age needs a job training? At first, I stayed silent for a long times because I was scaring of the retaliations that might happen to my father's and to my other family members. So I stayed silent for too long. But just one day I realized I cannot stay silent anymore. Our people is experiencing the genocide. I don't want my mothers to die in those horrific place, and I lost hope for the Chinese governments. Have mercy on my mother. Have mercy on Uyghur people. So on the 2019 August, this is my first. On 2019 August, I started to speak out. I first spoke up on the New York Times magazines. After that, I have been keep speaking up for my mothers. I have been keep speaking up for my mothers for after 1.5 years, there is still no any news about her whereabouts. Chinese government still don't want to give me any news about where is my mother. So in order to better speak up, that might happen to my father's and to my other family members. So I stay silent for too long. But just one day I realized I cannot stay silent anymore. Our people is experiencing the genocide. I don't want my mothers to die in this horrific place. And I lost hope for the Chinese governments. Have mercy on my mother, have mercy on Uyghur people. So on the 2019 August, this is my first, on 2019 August, I started to speak out. I first spoke up on the New York Times magazines. After that, I have been keep speaking up for my mothers. I have been keep speaking up for my mothers for after 1.5 years, there is still no any news about her whereabouts. Chinese government still don't want to give me any news about where is my mother. So in order to better speak up, in order to during the time I was becoming an activist, speaking of my mother's, my work, my daily life was totally influenced by that. I cannot totally focus on my careers, focus on my job, focus on the project that I am supposed to do, just like my colleague, my friends. So on this year, January, in order to fully dedicate myself to raising awareness about my mother, in order to fully dedicate myself to do something for Uyghurs that are suffering, I joined the Campaign for Uyghur as an outreach director to better speak up for my mothers and my people. I am not the only one experiencing this tragedy. There are many, many Uyghur children like me are searching for their parents. During the quarantines, we found each other on the social medias, and we decided to do something together to tell the people our parents are missing. This is one of the collective videos. I won't play all of that because of the time reason, but this, I hope you can just watch a little bit.
In the time of COVID-19 pandemic, the whole world has been feeling the pain of losing or being distanced from the loved ones. We grieve for the losses and sadden for the wretchedness. Can you imagine that the Uyghurs have been living in such desperation for the past 4 years? Millions of innocent Uyghurs are unlawfully held in the modern-day concentration camps and prisons by China, just because of their religion, ethnicity, and intellectual influences.
Yet, the word is muted. China, where is our family?
China, release my mom arbitrarily. China, release my father Mehmet Tohti.
China, release my mother, Merhaba Abşkır, and my sister, Nigar Abşkır.
China, release my mother, Nushan Abbas.
China, release my father, Muhammad Ali Tursun, my uncle, Abdullah Muhammad.
China, release my father, Emincan Zaydin.
China, show me my father.
China, release my family members.
I ask the Chinese government to release my parents, Ashim Ibrahim and Yusuf Muhammad, immediately.
China, release my sister Aygul Abdat.
China, release my mother Rahila Tawut.
China, release my mom, Suriye Tursun.
China, release my father Abdullah Abdurrahman.
China, release my sister Bilgina Tashmehmet.
China, release my father, Musajjad Ahmed.
China, release my family members.
China, release my father Mehmet Abdullah. China, release my brother Uyghur Mehmet.
China, release my mother, Hajar Yunur, and my brother, Ilyas Tursun.
China, release all my family members.
China, release my dad, Erkin Ibrahim.
China, release my grandmother Shamshkamer Abnes.
As you can see in this video, I am not the only one experiencing all those sadness, and my mother is not the only one who is being detained. There are millions of people detained in the concentration camp. There are many children like me are spent day and night asking the Chinese government, where is our family members? And there are also many Uyghurs children that they have family members detained in those concentration camps, but because of, just like me in the past, scared of the retaliation from the Chinese government, they suffered in silence. But right now, I don't want to, the reasons why I tell you my story is not because I wanted to complain or I want a place to release my sadness. The reason why I tell you my story is all of the sad story is I want you to know, I want all of the people around the world to know what's happening to Uyghurs and to take actions. Luckily, this year's the State Department declares that the China's repressions of Uyghur is genocide. This is a little bit progress, and I'm glad that little bit progress happened, but the world still needed to do more. The US still needed to do more. All of the countries still needed to do more to stop the genocide. If you want to ask me, how can I help Uyghurs? I conclude 5 steps that might be helpful. The first is sign. When you see petitions going on the social medias about the Uyghurs crisis, like the revoked Beijing's right to host the 2020's Winter Olympic Games on human rights, please sign that. All of the signatures count. This is one of the examples. The second action is please tell your friends, relative, colleague, all of the people around you. This is what I do when I just met a stranger. He or she asked me, where are you come from? I will tell every bit of my stories. Like, I am a Uyghurs. Do you know Uyghurs? This is what happens to Uyghurs, and this is what's happening to my family. Not because I need someone to talk, because I need more people to know what's going on. Third action is share. Please, everybody use social media in today's world. Please, just when you see a testimonies related to Uyghur crisis, please share on your social media. If you have 500 people, friends on your Facebook, and you share an articles, at least 50 people, if 50 people, like among 10% know what's going on Uyghurs, that help. This is my organization's social media accounts. Sorry, I cannot click on that, but if you can screenshot and just type the links in your browser, that would be great. You can follow them and keep updates on what's happening to Uyghurs. The fourth action is write. If you have time, please write to your local officials and inform them about the issues, such as the forced disappearances, unlawful detention, forced labels, and Uyghur, most importantly, Uyghur genocide. It's their jobs to take action. The fifth is what I hope the countries can do. I hope the foreign countries can cause the China's economic pain until it reverses course. I hope the countries can stop importing products made by Uyghur forced labor. China won't stop the Uyghur genocide by just realizing it's wrong one day. It's not realistic. If one bad person do a bad things or unlawful thing, we need to punish them to let them know you cannot do that. This is the only way around. So I hope that China can sanctions officials related to the Uyghur genocide and stop importing products made by the Uyghur forced labor. Only giving punishment, China can stop their atrocity. This is my speech today, and as a Uyghur, I really appreciate all of you here hearing our stories. Please help Uyghurs before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Akeda. We're doing what we can, and I think others will join us, and we will try and create a wave. And we hope that what comes of that is, among other things, that you are reunited with your mother. That's a very painful part of your story that I think everybody can relate to. And so thank you for sharing that, and we send our heartfelt wishes to you that this pain will soon come to an end.
Thank you.
I'm now going to introduce Rabbi Susan Tendler, who is the second of our moderators. And Rabbi Tendler grew up in Virginia and received her bachelor's degree in religious studies with concentrations on Islam and Judaism from the University of Virginia. She went on to study education and received her ordination at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. She served as a rabbi in B'nai Zion congregation in Chattanooga, and prior to that was an associate rabbi at Congregation Bethel in Norfolk, Virginia, and is currently the rabbi at Congregation Beth Tikva in Richmond, British Columbia. In her past community, she co-chaired the Faith and Culture Committee of the Mayor's Council Against Hate with two colleagues of different faiths. And she continues to chair the Resolutions Committee of the Rabbinical Assembly, where she first began to learn about the atrocities facing the Uyghur people. So I'm now introducing and turning this over to Rabbi Susie Tendler.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for the honor of being a part of this event today. As we heard in Akeda's story about missing her mom, it seems to be part of the common thread that many of our of those who come to give testimony today share. It was part of the story that really spoke to me when I spoke with Mehmet Tohti the other day, and his separation from his mother and the atrocities that have befallen his family, the occurrences that keep them separated to this day. I'll let him speak personally to that, but let me first introduce him more professionally, which is that Mehmet began his career as a teacher at the Kashgar Normal University in East Turkestan. Fearing for his safety, he fled China in 1991 and eventually came to Canada in 1998. Mehmet is one of the co-founders of the World Uyghur Congress, and at present, he is the executive director for the Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project based in Ottawa. He has testified 4 times before the Canadian Parliament and twice in the European Parliament. In short, Mehmet has dedicated his whole life to this one cause, Uyghur rights, praying that his efforts have made some positive difference for his family and for his people. Mehmet, it's my honor to introduce you and to have you share your story with all of us today.
You are muted, brother.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for Akeda. I know Professor Rahila Dawood. She's well known, and she's a professor at the well-known university where I studied biology, and she doesn't need any training, vocational training, and most importantly, millions of people, they don't need any training. And unfortunately now, the Uyghur people are going through a tough time. Today, I would like to share a different story. Since 2 months, I spent a whole of my time analyzing more than 600 files of testimony from Uyghur victims. And within 2 weeks, we are going to publish or release that report. What I found from 600 files that I studied, it is disturbing. And we found that the systematic, well-designed and orchestrated, the plan by the top level of the state to bottom level of the government, Uyghur family destruction as one of the genocidal tool carried out by the Chinese government. What I mean by Uyghur family destruction. When millions of the Uyghurs, some said 3 million and some said 5 million, according to Chinese own white paper published on September 14th, 2020. And the Chinese white paper said, since the beginning of 2014 to 2019, the government detained 1.29 million, almost 1.3 million each year for vocational transformation center. If you add up from 2014 to 2019, it makes 7.8 million Uyghurs. And if you look at the surface footages or videos on the social media, you see all doors are locked and the streets are deserted. And if 3 million people missing out of 12 or 13 million, you don't see the deserted streets. And the Chinese internal white paper, actually it is open. The Guardian newspaper and other Western newspaper already reported that, including the Chinese newspaper, South China Morning Post, that 7-8 million a lot. I don't mean that currently 7-8 million Uyghurs in the concentration camps. That is the number that Chinese government said we put them in a vocational and transformation center. And when government put this many people uprooted from their families, what is going to happen? It is going to affect the family. When the government displaced millions of people and scattered them all across China for forced labor, the manufacturing facilities, that is family destruction, just uprooting the family. And when government taking away nearly 1 million Uyghur children from their families, that is family destruction. When the government organized, orchestrated mass gang rape against male or female detainees in a concentration camp, that is family destruction. When the government installed 1.5 million Astrakhan Chinese to the Uyghur families where male head of family is in concentration camps for 24/7 to stay, live, sleep together. That is family destruction. When the government enforced the families to divorce if one partner is living abroad, when the government pushing for enforced divorce, that is family destruction. When government forcing Uyghur women to marry with Astrakhan Chinese, that is family destruction. When the government sterilizing the 80% of the Uyghur women, that is family destruction. And this list is going on and on. These are the conclusions I found from the 600 family files. And one more to add. Denunciation of family members and putting one family member to hostile to another through the Chinese government populated videos and talking bad about their relatives abroad and threatening them through the mouths of their relatives. And also confiscation of passport, denying the birthright privileges for Uyghur children born abroad. If you add up all together, that is family destruction. And the family destruction is done by the systematic means of family separation. These above I counted nearly 7-8 categories. That is the policy of family separation with the end goal of destroying the entire family. And also there is internal documents revealed by the Western media and the Chinese government openly mandated to break the lineage, break the root, break the origin, break the connection of Uyghurs. That is not only intended to destroy everyone's life, personal life. It is family, communal bond, and a whole society. That is exactly what is happening right now. And we are, as a concerned people and some media, more focusing on the Uyghur genocide, rightfully so. But this family destruction is only mentioned within the context of family separation of missing children. The Chinese government is targeting Uyghur families. The destroying them.
Can I get you to just put up your mic a little bit? I'm sorry for the interruption.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Amazing.
Okay. So these are the policies. Now, hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs living abroad. They are not communicating with their family members. They don't know whether their family members are alive or dead. And since October 23rd, I don't know my mother is alive or dead. And just I can show my mother here if I can share. Can you see, or did I share the screen? Let me see.
It's clear.
Yeah, this is my mother, 78 years old. And this is the message I have received last. It is July 20th, early morning 6:02. It was 3 hours prior for me to go and testify before the International Human Rights Subcommittee. And someone, Zun Long names, lives in Sichuan, China, sent me the message, your mother is dead. I read this message in two ways. One is my mother is dead. Another is it is a reminder or a threat for me if I continue to go and testify before the committee. I went along and I testified. And this is the destruction of family between children and the parents, between spouses, between siblings. This is the huge human tragedy that is currently going on for Uyghurs. And at least with the tireless campaign and talking with the MPs one by one, working with the Multifaith group and the nice people in Canada like you, and we managed to push our parliament to recognize Uyghur genocide. Again, our government did not acknowledge the genocide yet. And what does it mean for China? It can be many things, but one thing is for sure, that is the green light for Chinese genocide to be continued. And the second message, basically, we are undermining the essence of never again by asking more evidence needed or unfettered access by the international community to see the crime scene. It is the delay tactics, and that can be interpreted by Chinese government as a green light. And by these excuses, we are emptying the meaning of never again. And this is not acceptable. And the evidence is clear. Canadian legal scholars and unbiased international experts, they came together, more than 50 people. They issued the reasoning for the genocide determination. Chinese government already met all 5 elements of genocide definition. And plus we have to add the high-tech component to it, because Chinese government is using facial recognition technology, blood sampling, DNA sequencing, and fingerprinting, iris scan, and everything. And even high-tech companies in China, just like Dahua, it is the largest camera manufacturing company in the world, and the Huawei, and the Alibaba, all of them, they made Uyghur recognition software or application, and they received a patent for that. When because it is contracted by the Chinese government, and the Chinese government mandated to install those software all street corners and everywhere. When they detect the Uyghurs within 15 seconds, it can trigger the police alarm, and anywhere in China, just arrest Uyghurs. And so question could be asked here, why the Chinese government is doing so? Why the one state, by risking its reputation and all other factors, why one state continues to commit this genocide? And recently, the March 13th, our parliament has released its report. It was the report prepared by International Human Rights Subcommittee, and the Foreign Affairs Committee reviewed and adopted, and it is released. And at the beginning, the report quoted me: the Chinese government wants this land, does not want the ancestral owner of this land, because that piece of land called East Turkestan not only rich in energy resources, uranium and all precious metals, at the same time it is the vital to achieve Chinese Marshall Plan to be a global boss, because Chinese Belt and Road Initiative announced by Xi Jinping in 2014. If you look at the two events, Uyghur Genocide, the beginning of Uyghur Genocide and the announcement of the Belt and Road Initiative, it comes exactly at the same time. The Chinese 4 land corridors out of 6 can connect the Chinese mainland to Eurasia, Central Asia, Europe, and all the way Turkey and Africa by land. Has to cross the landmass of East Turkestan, and the Chinese government, for that reason, instead of sharing the resources with the owner of this land, Chinese government decide to eliminate the owner of this land and make this territory for permanently their own. And the Chinese government saw the Uyghurs as a risk factor and decided to be eliminated. And so basically, the Chinese government is seeing that Uyghurs as a hurdle for their ambitious plan to be a global boss. For that reason, Chinese government is quite stubborn to listen to international criticism. Unless there is a cost for Chinese government, they won't stop. Because of the US sanction, now Chinese economy is suffering, and many more than 50 entities, government entities already sanctioned by United States. And the cotton, tomato product, these are the huge number. Almost 30% of the global supply of the cotton product is coming out of the area. The 90% of the Chinese export of cotton or cotton-related products made by Uyghur forced labor coming out of East Turkestan. These are the huge numbers. And nearly 30% of the ketchup tomato products of global supply coming out of that area. And nearly 42% of polysilicon that is being used for solar panel is being produced in that area, 42% of global supply. These are the huge numbers. And we have a Canadian company, Canadian Solar, is operating right at the heartland of East Turkestan, Uyghur populated area, Uyghur forced labor. And we have Jenkins Solar, and we have Dynasty Gold, and other mining companies and the energy companies. The Canada is 5th largest investor in the region. If you read the Chinese ambassador's op-ed in yesterday in the Globe and Mail, Chinese ambassador said that Canada's export to China or direct investment to China soared nearly more than 95% in last year. We are still continuing as a business as usual. And on January 12th, our Global Affairs announced advisory for Canadian companies to exercise due diligence. How they can exercise the due diligence? Canadian companies do not have that resources and the ways and the means to send the investigation team to the area and to check each step of the supply chain, whether their products or supply chain are tainted with the Uyghur forced labor. And the Chinese government doesn't allow that. It is the job of the government. Just throwing the ball to the Canadian companies, that is the excuse. And we should be serious about that if we announce something. Our announcement should not be a laughing matter for Chinese government sitting in Beijing. If we mean something, we have to do it as ways that serious government can do. And so unfortunately, we don't have a piece of legislation to ban the products made by forced labor. There is some international obligation from International Labor Organization as a signatory, or World Trade Organization, or child labor, or other UN convention. But in Canada, we don't have a piece of legislation to ban the products made by forced labor. And we have to call our MPs. They have to introduce the similar legislation as US introduced Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And also we have to push our companies to disclose their supply chain as US passed Uyghur Forced Labor Disclosure Act. We are very far away. And if government doesn't acknowledge the Uyghur genocide, how they can work with the international allies? You have to accept first in order to get others on board. And unfortunately, we are thinking to safely release Tu Michael, or secure the release of Tu Michael by bowing down to China. But that does not work. I have been telling our government officials since a number of years, it does not work. China never, ever released Tu Michael, just saying that Canada is too nice and naive and very careful and calculating its step and measuring its tone, and Canada acting like a nice boy. And one day China get impressed from Canada and they release Tu Michael. That's the thinking of our government. It does not work. This is the weakness. Actually, this is, on the other hand, the directly encouraging the Chinese government to detain Tu Michaels much longer. Because from the Chinese eyes, the detaining Tu Michaels and using them as a remote control and controlling the decision-making process of Canadian government, that is what they wanted. And Canada is proving the Chinese way of handling things is right. And so in this case, why China should release Tu Michael? We are encouraging the Chinese government to detain much longer because we always feel the elephant in the room in a decision-making process. That is exactly the way Chinese government wanted. And we are exactly responding as Chinese government wanted. So there is no reason for Chinese government to release unless we change our course, unless we stand up on our values, unless we work with international allies. In order to do that, we have to ban Huawei because all other Five Eyes countries already banned. We still did not. And how we can work with the international allies by isolating ourselves from our own allies. So we have to put pressure on the government and our legislator to stand up on our values. And we are the country contributed for international system, many legal institutions. So now it is time for us to be Canadians one more time. Otherwise, it is difficult. It is difficult. And this is not only about the Uyghur genocide issue. It is about our future, our children's future. And the Uyghurs' experience today will be the experience of many more if we do not stop the Chinese madness, because my children, children's children, and everyone's children and the next generation will live much longer than us, hopefully. And if the Chinese madness won't stop, they wake up in different world when China becomes global superpower. And that world will not be the same. And the Chinese government is actively exporting its authoritarianism around the world. And they are dictating their own terms and the conditions. And they are using the international, the institutions that Western governments and the people established with their blood and the tears for their own advantages and manipulating whole system. So it's time to say enough is enough, and it's time to change our approach to China and to realize the danger we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mehmet. You covered a lot of ground, and all of it is needs to be attended to.
Yeah.
We have one more speaker this evening, and to introduce our final speaker, I am pleased myself to introduce Mufti Sujat Ali, who is graduated from Kashgar Teachers University. He was a member of the religious board of the British Columbia Muslim Association, which is the largest Muslim association in BC with over 17 locations. He's also the imam of the Masjidul Haq Mosque in Vancouver. He was nominated as an ambassador of peace by the Universal Peace Federation in 2006, and is a member of the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish Trialogue Committee. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Mufti Muhammad Sujat Ali.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. It is indeed my absolute pleasure and honor to be part of this very notable, needed, and at the same time, according to our tradition, noble dialogue that has been organized to create awareness, not just locally here, but also possibly globally, about the atrocities being done to Uyghur Muslims. We hope and pray that this small initiative of ours locally here will really be a source of spark to many similar series of dialogue and discussion across the globe. And we hope and pray for the best. It is on this note my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce our final speaker and the person who would be sharing the experience with us, Tunisia Matsadiq. She started her career by studying at Kashgar Teachers University, which is in East Turkestan. She completed her bachelor's degree in chemistry at that university, and then she moved to Vancouver, Canada, and at home here she studied the nursing program at Vancouver Community College. Now she works as a nurse. She also works for Uyghur Human Rights. She is also part of the board and Uyghur Women Council East Turkestan Association of Canada, Deputy Manager of Campaign for Uyghurs. This is a very short bio that I have just read to you. And with this, it is my pleasure and honor to let Ms. Tunisia to share her painful, eye-opening, and very touching story with us. The floor is yours.
This is Tunisia. I just want to say thank you for everyone from bottom of my heart, and listen our story, and then also you have been work hard to send out a lot of letter to our Canadian government, also our parliament members. I really appreciate. Today I just want to say as a thank you is Akeda and Mehmet Tohti, and they give us a lot of detailed, very heart-touching story. And I just want to add something here is as the Uyghurs right now, every single Uyghur people live in outside of China, outside of East Turkestan. We haven't been contact our family members in our back country more than 3 years, including me. And I have no idea about my 3 brothers and their family. And then also my husband's parents and then his brothers and sisters. And this is very like a psychological process. Every single of Uyghur people have to like going through. This is very, very hard. And the just Mehmet Tohti mentioned is Chinese government is try to destroy everything we have and we used to have in our back country. Not only in our back country, also outside of China and outside of East Turkestan, like me and like Mehmet Tohti, like a lot of Uyghur people. And because it's our family root and then family tear apart by the Chinese government. Not only our like communication, everything we have all cut off by the Chinese government. I have a cousin, and he graduated university, math and IT. He has a double bachelor degree. He works at the city where I was born. Chira is a very far city in East Turkestan. And then he works at the Chira city #1 middle school. It's Uyghurs high school. I don't know that high school still exists, or my cousin is still working over there. I have no idea, but I want to share his story because this is the story as I have to share. And he married 2014 September, and then his wife was in Khotan, the city. And even when I contacted before, it's 3 years, and then they told me they haven't been able to being together because both of their work, one is my cousin work in Chira city, and his wife, he works at Khotan city, one of the middle school. And in East Turkestan, almost 70% of family working like that. And from Chira to Khotan, this two city is, if you have a car, you can drive in 1.5 hours. And then most of the people, they don't afford a car, or if they have a car, the government always asks them to work Saturday and Sunday. They only able to see each other, meet each other as family members once a month or once in 2 months. This is very hard for your families. And this is actually by the government implement this kind of policy for the even government worker and try to tear off the family and then cut off the family roots. And my cousin, he has a daughter. I don't know where is she, and where is my cousins and his family. And because of both of the wife and husband working 2 different cities, they are not able to see each other very often. Their daughter has to stay with the grandparents, and then the innocent daughter only can meet parents once a while. This is not only my cousin's story. We have millions of people living like that right now. And then if they are alive in East Turkestan. And also is the other situation. Gang rape in the concentration camp is a huge issue, regardless women or men, for the Uyghur people. And I just want to share one of the camp survivor, Sairagul's story. And her testimony actually posted in Washington Post, 2019 is August. And then in her story, and she said that, I just want to tell exactly what she said in her testimony in that article. And Sairagul, she's a Kazakh citizen. That's why she was able to escape these concentration camps. And she said in her testimony, one day is a Chinese official asked camp detainees go outside, and all of them go outside right away. And she said almost 250 to 300 detainees, one corner of the huge concentration camps. And they came out outside, and then Chinese official asked them to line up. Everyone was in the line. And one of the Chinese official asked one of the young Uyghur lady and then confess her sin. And the young Uyghur lady, she stood up and then tell she was not a good person before she learned Chinese language in the concentration camps. And then she was doing her pray, and she was have a hijab and just a scarf, not even hijab. And then she's just because of this, and she thinks she was a bad person. And right now, she's in concentration camps. She studied Chinese language, and then now she thinks she is a good person. Just after her speech finished, as a Chinese official ordered her to came out in front of almost 300 detainees, including men and women. And that lady, she came out in front of 300, almost 300 detainees. Almost 20 Chinese officials raped that Uyghur lady in front of almost 300 detainees, one by one. And detainees, if they cry, if they don't want to see, turn their face off or close their eyes, and then they took by the Chinese police. And then Sairagul said, and they never see them again once Chinese police took them away from that scene. And then imagine, as Uyghurs, you have to accept whatever Chinese officials tell you to do something or whatever the order. This is inhuman. This is just one of the thing in the concentration camps. Also, not only in the concentration camps, Chinese government sent 1.1 million Chinese cadre to the Uyghurs family. The family have to stay with the Chinese cadre 24 hours, 7 days, and eating with them, sleeping with them, and live with them. And they have to listen whatever Chinese cadre tell them. Otherwise, they will end up being in concentration camps. And while the wives alone at home, wives forced to sleep with the Chinese cadre, regardless he is or she is. And this is, by doing this, Chinese government is not only in the concentration camp and also outside of the concentration camps, dehumanize and demoralize Uyghur people and torture them psychologically and physically. And millions of Uyghur children and sent to the orphanage camps and beaten by the Chinese officials. We have seen a lot of videos how Chinese officials treat innocent Uyghur people and Uyghur children. I really appreciate this group. We have done such very amazing work, and I also ask, just like Mehmet Tohti said, we need to do more. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe in few years maybe no one left in East Turkestan, because Chinese government, China is the number, like, except the US right now, is that they are very, very powerful economically, and then a lot of country afraid of speaking up because of the power of the Chinese government has right now. And that's the huge problem. And just like our government, they don't want to do real action right now. We have a lot of evidence. We have 3 or 8 pages and signed it by the Chinese officials, a document revealed from China. Also, a lot of people's testimony, camp survivors' testimony. There are mountains of evidence, and then still there are honestly not really enough actions all over the world. We know this is the time, actually, we have to really work hard, because we need to face our morality, our expectations also we have to think of, and what we have to live for our next generation. Our next generation, if they grow up, if they heard about the Uyghur genocide, I am sure they will ask, and when you were there, when you listened to this genocide, what you have done. And every single human being, we have our responsibility to do something to stop this genocide. Thank you, everyone. And this is really hard topic. I hope everyone find a way to relax after our all this section done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tunisa. When Mufti Sujat introduced you, he must have had some prophecy, because he said that your testimony was going to be painful, eye-opening, and touching. And he was right. And thank you for opening your heart with us and to joining with us in this event and in this effort. And let's hope we can do some of what is called for. I'd like to open the floor now to any of the moderators who would like to ask questions of the participants. Akeda had to leave us. She needed to be driven from where she was to where she needs to go. So we still have Mehmet and Tunisa here. So if either Dean Chris or Rabbi Susie or Mufti Sujat have questions, please continue.
I can ask first. This is a really challenging time given the political climate between Canada and China at the moment. But the way that Western countries work is not necessarily the way that the Chinese government works. And both of you, all three of you, have alluded to different actions that perhaps might be taken. And Tunisa, you said real work and real actions, and you are right. Each and every human being on this planet is responsible. And Mehmet, you also talked about governments taking real actions. Could you, in your minds, share with us what are things that the everyday person could be doing that would actually perhaps have an impact on the Chinese government to furthering the cause of the Uyghur people right now?
Thank you. Let me go first. My microphone is open. Can you hear me? I hope, yeah. Okay. And as I mentioned a little earlier, now our Foreign Affairs Committee in our Parliament, they released a report. It is the groundwork for genocide recognition, just the reason why the committee's International Human Rights Affairs Committee recognized the Uyghur genocide. What is the reasoning behind that? And so with that report, the committee listed 15 actionable items. And so that 15 actionable items is important. It is already the proposal by the parliamentary committee to government, calling on the government to act. And so if we look at those 15 actionable items, and the committee called on the government to work with international allies and make sure that the atrocities are being committed by Chinese government are recognized as a genocide. That is one actionable item, asking the government to work with the international allies, but government itself did not acknowledge yet. And so how it is going to work, I don't know. And we have to acknowledge, we have to respect the will and the determination of the parliament, our own parliament first. When we recognize it and we have a better face, just go after other countries to do the same. And this is one actionable item. And so we have to call our government officials. And secondly, as I said, the second most important issue is that Canada has a lot of leverage on the international institutions, just like we have missions in Geneva and the New York and other international institutions. Also, we are represented. So we have to push this issue on the international forums as well. And so Bob Ray made number of statement at the UN in New York, and that is a good opportunity. And we have to do it in Geneva and other international forums as well. And the third issue we have to work with our government is, at least with the parliamentarians, we have to have a legislation to ban the forced labor products coming to our markets, because now, honestly, every Canadians, we are consuming the forced labor products. And basically we are supporting with our pocket money and sending that money to that government who are practicing forced labor. So this is unacceptable. It is the job of the government, and we have to do that. And we cannot delay this. And thirdly, we have a Magnitsky bill already passed to punish those who are responsible for human rights abuse. And we applied that bill for some people from some countries. When it comes to China, we just mute it. And that is the huge problem. And I'm arguing on media and with my meeting with the government officials. By doing so, we are undermining our credibility. And if we apply that bill for people from Venezuela, Cuba, or Russia, or Saudi Arabia, when it comes to genocide, if we mute it, if we cannot even mention to apply that bill to genocide committers, what kind of message we are sending to the world? We are applying double standard. That bill is for only some countries, for some people, not for all countries, all people. That is the message we are sending. That is incredibly undermining our credibility on an international arena. Most of the time when I talk with the media people, the global media people, that question pops up. Hey, in Canada, you have already Magnitsky bill, and some countries do not have, and the UK is just passed recently. Australia is working for it. And so why you don't use that Magnitsky bill to punish those people who are responsible? This is an issue, and that is something to do with the government's fear-centric and extreme degree of cautious attitude, just calculating the step, not angering China, that kind. It is something to do with the government's attitude. Otherwise, we don't need the legislation. Legislation is already passed. It is up to the minister. Just we already provided the names. United States already sanctioned more than 50 people for in terms of Uyghur genocide and the Hong Kong crackdown. The names are already there. List is already there. European Parliament did it. And so why Canada is waiting for? And this is one actionable item we have to push our government. And third, as the signatory country of Geneva Convention, we have 3 obligations. One is stop the genocide. Second, punish those responsible for genocide. Third, responsibility to protection doctrine. We have to protect people. That is the Canadian initiative in 2005, and it was accepted globally. And we have to protect those vulnerable people. Maybe we cannot do anything for those who are trapped in East Turkestan under concentration camp, except the global campaign to stop it. At least we can do something for those trapped in third countries who are facing deportation to China every single day, just like there are thousands of people in Turkey. And they don't have any access to anything, and the UNHCR office they don't accept any application because they have full of applications from Syria and Iraq, more than 3-4 million refugees there. And there's no other mechanism they can go. And for Canada, in order to community sponsorship, first condition is it has those people have to be referred by the UNHCR. If UNHCR doesn't accept the refugee application, how they can refer? So this is the problem. And so we have to do something to offer our humanitarian assistance. And now as the National Post reported, we are supporting some pro-Chinese groups here and working for the interests of Chinese government. And today, after the conference, I spoke with one MP, and I was shocked to learn that Canadian federal government is still funding the Confucius Institute in Canada. It is unacceptable. And the Western governments are shutting down those institutions. And my government, with my tax money, is supporting those China-backed institutions. China is a rich country. They have tons of money to support their own institution. Why we should support them? There are crazy people in federal government, believe me. I have utmost faith for most of them, but there are crazy people. And when CSIS had told a number of years, and he repeatedly told a number of times, all of our three-level governments are full of infiltrated Chinese agents. When he said that, I did not believe. Now I have many reasons to believe it. We have to clean up our government from the infiltrated Chinese agents. If you do not do this kind of advocacy work regards to China, you do not realize it. How deeply infiltrated those China-backed agents in Canadian, all three levels of government. We are losing our country. That's the reason CSIS had warned our government since 6-7 years. We didn't do anything. And the United States, there are court cases, and in Europe, there are court cases. They are arresting the Chinese agents and the Chinese spies who are stealing our intellectual property and this and that. In Canada, none. We don't have any court cases. It doesn't mean that there's none exist. We have a full of Chinese agents. Look at the Chinese ambassador every day. He is instructing our elected officials and elected institutions what they should do, what they shouldn't do. Just visioning himself sitting in the Chinese imperial court and ordering Canada to do something. There is no any reaction from our government. And a similar thing happened in Czechia and Sweden. The whole opposition and the government and they called the ambassador and summoned the ambassador. So many things happen. But in Canada, we are silent. We lost our sense. We do not even ask our government why you do not react. We have to react. And yesterday, for example, 2 days ago, a Chinese ambassador went to Winnipeg and mobilized the Chinese people, this and that, and just organized them to come up and the protest and to condemn the parliamentary decision for recognizing Uyghur genocide. Our ambassador in Beijing, he cannot go anywhere without getting a permission from Chinese government. He cannot go anywhere. And the Chinese ambassadors feel free to preach the Canadian the elected officials and the people. They are paying for Chinese people and forcing the Canadian citizens of Chinese origin to work for Chinese government by hijacking their families back home. So we have to clean up our government and we have to clean up our market from forced labor product and the Chinese influence the campaign. And we have to shut down those Confucius Institute, and we have to have the Foreign Transparency Act that Australia already enacted. And now there are a lot of former cabinet ministers and MPs. They are receiving salary from Chinese government, and they are sitting corporate chairs backed by the Chinese government. And they are talking in the mouth of the Chinese government in Canada, right here. And we don't have that Foreign Agent Registration Act, and we cannot do anything. We have so many things to do. Just for the Uyghurs for a minute, it is for the national security issue in Canada. That's the reason CSIS head is talking a number of times on this issue, pressing each and every time how important it is. There are many things we have to do as a Canadians. We have to push. We have to put the China issue as a #1 threat for Canada. Unless we realize it, we don't do anything with the Huawei, and we don't do anything with the Uyghurs and the Hong Kong or other thing. All the time we feel that elephant in our room. That elephant is controlling in our decision-making process. And so these are the issues, and I'm sorry, sometimes I'm quite frustrated looking at how government is operating. And last year, March 9th, I sat down with the Minister of Foreign Affairs for 1.5 hours. And I'm not in that capacity just to give him the advice. At least I shared, because I was educated there. I was a university teacher there. I understand how the Chinese mentality works. And so I told him, your approach is dangerous, and this is just justifying Chinese government's further detention of two Michaels. You shouldn't do that. And now the two Michaels sham trial is on the Chinese court, and we now still thinking we naively wasted 2 more years without doing anything, and the Chinese government, everything is at their disposal. Just we are watching from distance without doing anything, and not able to do anything unless we create that leverage against China. If we stay silent like this, we lose many Michaels. And for example, Olympics, and there are lobby groups. They said nothing happens. Okay, what if Chinese government abducts another two Canadian athletes? Can the Canadian Olympic Committee can guarantee that? No. So these are the issues, main issues. Just like, as I said, more proactive government policy for Uyghur genocide. First, they have to acknowledge it and respect the will of Canadian Parliament. And secondly, we have to have a clear legislation on the forced labor products coming from the Uyghur region. And thirdly, we have to use that Magnitsky bill to prosecute those Chinese officials. And fourth, we have to extend our hands just for a couple thousand Uyghur families. We already gave the list to the government, very vulnerable situation with multiple children because they lost their husbands in concentration camps. At least those children can receive education in Canada and become the contributing members of the society. And the third, we have to clean up our government from the infiltrated Chinese agents, and we have to clean up our market from forced labor tainted products. These are the couple headlines I can give as a summary.
There's quite a list of activities that need to be done, but every one that you mentioned seems crucial. So I'm caught between feeling dispirited and inspired. I'm somewhere bouncing between those two because the task is huge, but to not do it seems beyond bearable. I'm going to open the floor if either Mufti Shujaj or Dean Chris have a question or comment, and then we'll draw this to a close.
I really appreciate the detailed discussion that we have had during this last hour. One of the things that came to my mind, but time is up. I was just looking at my time and I need to also go to pray. If it's possible, I was thinking of the situation at the moment concerning the atrocities being done to Uyghur Muslims, the awareness that has been created globally in this regard. Do you see any positive change that has brought to change the situation for Uyghur Muslims locally in East Turkestan? Do you see any hope for that in the near future? That's something that came to my mind to ask to either of the respective panelists who could possibly share their experience and insight in this regard.
Mihrigul, can you go?
Siz cevaplan, siz yaxşı değilsiniz. I ask Mehmet Tohti, you can go first.
Okay. Yeah, just this is as I said in my opening, the Chinese government's campaign, the targeted the two pillars of Uyghur identity. One is the national identity for Uyghurs with their ethnic background and the religious, the history, language, and their tradition. And the second, the religious identity. And it is, I used to pray when I was in my back home. It is called Kargalak Mosque, mosque built in 1491. That mosque was destroyed. It is more than 500 years old mosque. And a Kashgar and Idgah Mosque built in 1491. Now it turned it into museum. And whoever have any religious material at home, not the Quran itself, any religious material written or article or something, or if you have a handheld device or computer, has any religious content, you are in concentration camp directly, not only the Islamic, if you're Christian or whatever the religion you believe. And religion is totally banned. And even some, the name is just like Muhammad, Aisha, those kinds of names also totally banned. And Australian Strategic Policy Institute identified more than 60,000 mosques already destroyed. 16,000 mosques we are talking about, all the mosques just built by the Uyghurs. And the Uyghurs are, I hate to categorize as a moderate Muslim or a Muslim. And because in our past history, as part of the Asian Silk Road, the Kashgar was the place where cultures and the trade and the religion frequently exchanged, because people went from east to west all the way to Egypt or Jerusalem and Rome, and they come back with the goods. So there is some tolerance among the people, the Uyghur people in the region. And to be honest, the religious understanding of the Turkic people in Central Asia, even in Turkey, a little bit different. We more about the essence of the religion, for justice, honesty, and this and that, and the important part of the Quranic teaching, and also rituals. And our the view to women is totally different, and a little bit different than some other cultures. But again, the Chinese government this time, with the order of Xi Jinping, as part of the break lineage, break the connection, break the origin that the government mandate, just dismantled all the shrines and the mosques and everything. Not only that, just force people to eat pork and force people to live with the Astrakhan Chinese. I'm not discriminating on Astrakhan Chinese, but somehow, if someone occupies your land, you don't like those people. You cannot just welcome them. And the Uyghurs, we don't have a history or custom of going to a Chinese restaurant. We never. The Uyghurs, we don't go to Chinese restaurant. And for a number of reasons, maybe their food is good, but we don't go just because of the hygienic purpose. And secondly, they eat many things that we don't eat. And for precautionary reason, we don't. But the Chinese people love our food. And now, unfortunately, we, just as part of the government's campaign, just to break down whole Uyghur society and to turn them by force as to loyal to Communist Party and just like assimilated in the Chinese part, they attacked that national identity that separated us from Chinese and the religious identity that separated us from Chinese. And unfortunately, the reaction of Islamic world, it is shameful. It is really shameful. And so far, Islamic Cooperation Organization, they issued a number of statements just supporting the Chinese government. And the Saudi prince went to China and supported the Chinese government's persecution. And Pakistan just offering us support. And basically say, we cannot say anything to China, and China has been our fresh air in the room and is supporting us. So, and then now Turkey used to be a vocal supporter. Now, because of the financial situation, Turkey is more closer to Russia and China than the West. And for that reason, the Turkey also turned out its back. And the Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all of those countries already became the satellite state of China. And the China effectively isolate those countries and the Uyghurs in those countries to cut the ties and to control their narrative and the government apparatus to minimize the Uyghur influence. Now, those countries, they cannot even talk anything for Uyghurs. And for that reason, the Uyghurs left alone just because of their Turkic background from the Turkish world as a Muslim from the Muslim world. It is quite a dilemma. And the Muslim world, mostly, they are using China as a leverage against the Western support to Israel. And after the Gaddafi and some other dictator leaders' tragic fate, and some Muslim countries also see the China as the power at some point save their life if something happens at the United Nations Security Council, because China has a veto power. And for that, the thing in their mind, that Saddam Hussein or others' fate, and they always rely on China. And so otherwise, I don't know if there's any financial connection, but mostly strategic reason. And does it change? I don't think so. And only if there is a hope, we have to work with the people from the public level. And unfortunately, those countries, they don't have any democratic venues or open press to circulate our opinions. This is the problem. And for that reason, we tried many, many times to reach out to Muslim countries. And at some point, Qatar and Bahrain, they wanted to speak up, and only 2 MPs, but they silenced. And Malaysia and Indonesia, they try to speak up, and they also consider the huge Chinese population in Indonesia. Okay. And so they are silenced. And most importantly, those countries do not have any leverage against China as well. So in the circumstances, Uyghurs fight them not only to keep their identity, at the same time to keep their religious identity as well. The Uyghurs are Muslims since 915, almost more than 1,000 years. And it is important that we pass this tradition to next generation. And I think it is impossible to practice any religious tradition in East Turkestan right now. And a total atheism or non-religious people the Chinese government is trying to create, and they are quite successful, because if you confiscate Quran and maybe people pray inside of their heart, and especially now Ramadan is coming, and the Chinese government will call all the Uyghurs to have mandatory lunch during the Ramadan, and if anyone refuses to drink or eat, end up in concentration camps. That is the practice when I was at school in 1980s, and still continue. And especially your imam, I try to reach out many imams in. It is your obligation now. You know the situation, and it is our obligation to speak up and spread this truth to all Muslim communities. And they have a connection in different countries back home, so we have to spread this tragedy and to create some awareness. With that global awareness in Muslim countries, maybe we can pressure the government to do something. Otherwise, now the Western governments, they are trying, at least compared to Muslim countries, they are trying their best. And I know that with my interaction with the Canadian government. And on the other hand, the Chinese government is spread on the propaganda among the Muslim countries and Africa and some other parts of the world, just saying that Uyghur genocide is the CIA propaganda or American propaganda to stop the Chinese rise. And that propaganda is quite effective. And I have to tell you, and in Turkey, for example, it is effective, and in Turkish media all the time, this is American propaganda. Nothing happens. And so Pakistan and some other countries as well. And most importantly, most of the Muslim countries, they have their own problem, and there is poverty, and there is a lot of financial economic problems, and they are struggling with their own affairs. And so it is important that at least we have to continue our pressure from the Western government. And most importantly, it is a humanitarian issue, regardless which faith you belong to. And the people shouldn't be subject that kind of genocide, and the people should not subject the genocide just because of their ethnic or religious background. And so we are working much harder with all faith groups, including Muslims. And tomorrow I will be joining with the Montreal Holocaust Museum. And I'm working with a number of Jewish organizations. And I have been working with them since 2006. And it is quite a dilemma, especially for Uyghur people. We have a Turkic background, and none of the Turkic countries are supporting us. And we are Muslim, none of the Muslim countries are supporting us. It is kind of odd. And sometimes Uyghurs ask themselves, if we are Muslim, then all the Muslim people are not the Muslim who are not supporting us, because Chinese government just persecuting just because we are Muslim. And the Muslim countries are supporting the Chinese government's persecution just because Uyghurs are Muslim. That is quite the interesting situation right now. So as an imam, probably you have more responsibilities just to waken up our Muslim communities. Unfortunately, the awareness raising among the Muslim communities in Canada, it is very low compared to other communities. And probably we need to do our homework here in Canada. At the same time, we have to spread this word or through social media to our friends and circles in back home, create some kind of awareness. Maybe that helps. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to Mehmet, and thank you to everyone. I'm going to turn this over to Norman now. We've gone longer than expected, but there is so much to learn and so much to feel in this situation. And so, Norman, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. I've been given the honor of making a few closing remarks, so I take pleasure in doing that. Firstly, I want to thank Alan, Kabir, and Yusuf. This has been a marvelous undertaking on their part, and they have pulled it together marvelously. It's gone extremely well, and these three people have put in a great deal of time, effort, and energy, and the end product speaks for itself. It was, the whole effort was remarkably impressive. I'd also like to thank the moderators. Rabbi Susie Tendler, the very Reverend Kristen Pappas, Mufti Mahad Shujaj Ali, for their questions, their comments, and their observations throughout. We're indebted to you for taking on that responsibility. And finally, and probably more importantly, I want to thank the panelists. Mahmoud, Tunisia, and Akeda. Their stories were heartbreaking, in essence. I thank them for their terrifying insight, Uyghur catastrophe that is taking place in East Turkestan. This has been a moving and meaningful expose of the tragedies befallen the Uyghur Muslim community. As a result, we can only redouble our efforts to raise awareness and promote change. At the very beginning, Alan gave us a little bit of a teaser as to who it is who's sponsoring this webinar. We are the Canadian Multifaith Initiative for Uyghur Rights. It's newly formed, is made up of men and women from the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian communities, and they've taken on the challenge of raising community awareness and promoting change. And as a result of tonight's session, some of the changes we need to promote have been delineated rather forcefully. I should point out that we have already done some of the things that have been outlined. Our first undertaking as a group, as a committee, was to send letters to every single member of parliament outlining 4 specific initiatives we wanted them to undertake, some of which were talked about tonight. The Magnitsky Act should be acted upon. That was in our letter. We sent backup letters promoting that. We've also sent letters to every Canadian senator because they are considering Bill S-204 dealing with organ harvesting. They are considering that now. That also is in our letter. We have a lot of work to do, and I think our committee is up to the challenge to try and take on some of the challenges facing us. If anybody watching this webinar would like to help us help the Uyghur Muslim community, please use our website, our email address, and send us your name, your community, your house of worship, and your email address, and we will add you to our list. Just for reference, our email address is our initials, actually, cmifur1@gmail.com. It's on all of our promotions, so if you missed it there, you can find it there. So with all of that, I wish you a good evening, and again, I thank everybody who participated, and I'm especially thank the panelists who offered very moving and meaningful stories as to what we should be acting upon. So again, I wish you a good evening, and we will hopefully do this again. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.